After the Giants won the Super Bowl in 2012, they did what most football teams do to celebrate. After going to Disney World, they held a parade through the streets of New York. During the parade, a fight broke out between a Giants fan and, of course, a Jets fan, the cause of which may seem obvious. Immediately, spectators did what most of us would have done. They pulled out their cell phones and video recorded the entire thing. From the videos, and there were many, we can see that not a single person jumped in and stopped or tried to break up the fight. Recently in the media, there have been many stories and instances where someone has cried for help in a public place, and yet people were slow to react, if they reacted at all. As members of a growing community, we should be aware of emergency situations and how to react to them. As a member of society, I've been in a situation where I was the bystander, and so I wanted to research this topic to learn more about it. Learning about the bystander effect will help us better understand human reactions in public places and, more importantly, emergencies. First, I will share with you some background information on the bystander effect. Second, examine the causes of why we choose to react or not. And finally, look into the outcome of what an emergency can be. So first, what exactly is the bystander effect? In order to get a better grasp of what the bystander effect is, we must first explore the background of the effect, and then second, outline the characteristics of what an emergency can be. So, in 1964, a lady named Kitty Genovese was attacked by a maniac. Now, 38 of her neighbors saw what was happening, but not a single one of them phoned the police, even though the assault lasted for over a half an hour. Latane and Darley researched this phenomenon in their 1969 study published in the American Scientist to try and explain why it was that Kitty's neighbors failed to help. According to Fisher and fellow researchers in a 2011 article published in the Psychological Bulletin, the bystander effect refers to the phenomenon that an individual's likelihood of helping decreases when passive bystanders are present in a critical situation. Basically, the more of us there are, the less likely we are to respond in emergency situations. So, what is an emergency? Well, according to the previously mentioned research by Latane and Darley, there are 5 distinct characteristics to an emergency that make it different from a situation. First, life, well-being, or property is in danger. And basically, this points out that since our well-being is at risk, we're more or less likely to get ourselves involved. Second, the situation must be an uncommon occurrence. In other words, people have little experience on how to handle it. Third, the nature of their emergency is different from case to case, meaning that all emergencies are unique. Fourth, there is little to no preparation made due to its uniqueness. Fifth, and finally, emergencies require immediate action. The limited amount of time to respond combined with the other 4 factors creates an environment that's high in stress, high in risk, low in reward, and low in competency, which is always a recipe for disaster, right? Now that we've discussed what the bystander effect is and how an emergency is characterized, let's move on to our second point. What causes us to react or not? In order to fully understand this phenomenon, why this phenomenon happens, we must discuss the 2 main causes that Latane and Darley outline. First, we will discuss the social influence, and second, we will move on to the diffusion of responsibility. First, let's explore the social influence. This was first examined through a study by Latane and Darley and published in a 1968 Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, where in this study, participants were put into a room to take a test. During the test, researchers started to fill the room with smoke, as if a fire had been started. When left alone, 75% of the time, participants left and reported the smoke. This number drops to 38% when 3 people are in the room, and drops even lower to 10% when 1 person is put into the room with others who didn't react to the smoke, basically people who are in on the experiment. This tells us that people react because they're basing their actions on what other people are doing around them. So, now that we've discussed the cause of social influence, let's move on to the second cause, diffusion of responsibility. According to an article by Marsh and Keltner in 2006, published in the University of California, Berkeley's Greater Good magazine, stated diffusion of responsibility is a reaction in which individuals see other witnesses to an emergency and feel less personally responsible to intervene. So basically, like when you're driving along and you witness an accident, you don't call 911 because you think people have already done it. Latane and Darley say that this diffusion of responsibility was the leading factor in the incident of abuse on Kitty Genovese. So after defining the bystander effect, discussing its causes, let us now explore the implications of this phenomenon and how it may affect us in emergencies. While it may seem almost depressing to think that in a time of need, nature guides us to run away or be more inactive as individuals, all hope is not lost. The implications of this previous research forces us to examine two distinct areas for further research: emergency training and volunteerism. First, in light of these findings, we as individuals must consider the amount of time and energy we spend on emergency training and its effectiveness. Findings from a 1982 study by Patton and Carver and published in the Journal of Applied Sociology note that training is often the best solution to the bystander effect. However, within this research, Patton and Carver explained that although training is needed for how to respond, how to respond to people, training is also needed for calls of emergency. So basically, how we alert others to our needs greatly impacts how they respond. Next, research into the bystander effect forces us to re-examine the ways we encourage society to volunteer for charity. If individuals are psychologically restrained in circumstances where people are placed in great harm, how can we expect individuals to react in less dangerous situations? Now that we know what the bystander effect is and how it affects us, let's wrap things up. It's important to discuss this effect in order to better understand our own human reactions in public emergencies. First, I described the meaning of the bystander effect. Secondly, explore the causes. And finally, hypothesize some implications. Look, the next time you're in a public setting and there's an emergency, I hope that you have a better idea of your role in that situation. But please, don't try and be a superhero. Look, recognize when faced with an emergency situation, you can take small steps to save the day.